They don't tell you that serving aboard a god costs you everything: your body, your mind, and eventually, your soul. My designation is Reactor Technician 7th Class, though I had another name once. A name my family spoke in the Underhive before the Mechanicus claimed me. I was 19 when they took me, not conscripted, chosen. The difference matters to them, not to us. The selection came during my shift at the Prometheum refinery. 13 hours into a 16-hour cycle, my hands black with chemical residue, my supervisor's voice crackling through the vox about quotas and the Emperor's unceasing demand for fuel. Then the tech priests arrived. Their robes were the color of dried blood, their faces hidden behind rebreather units that hissed with each breath. Servo skulls floated at their shoulders, their empty eye sockets glowing with scanning beams that swept across the refinery floor, across dozens of workers, until they stopped on me. Genetic markers acceptable, neural plasticity with intolerance, radiation resistance preliminary grade, adequate. The words meant nothing to me then. My supervisor stepped forward, tried to protest I was his most efficient sorter. He needed me to meet quota. The lead priest raised one netchodendrite, and my supervisor went silent, understanding instantly what I was only beginning to grasp. I no longer belonged to the refinery, to my family, or to myself. They transported us in a cargo holo with 40 other selectees. The journey to the Forge world lasted 3 weeks, though we had no way to mark time in the windowless hold. We sat on metal benches, our wrists mag-locked to restraint bars, breathing recycled air that tasted of copper and fear. A woman across from me whispered prayers until her voice gave out. A boy no older than 15 vomited repeatedly until there was nothing left but dry heaves. I stayed quiet, watching the red emergency lighting paint shadows on the hull, trying not to think about what waited at journey's end. What I learned in the first hour of training: Titans are not machines. They are churches that walk, weapons platforms the size of high blocks, avatars of the machine god's wrath-given form in adamantium and ceramite and barely contained plasma fire, and they are hungry. The training complex sprawled across an entire subcontinental plate, a landscape of firing ranges and simulation domes and punishment yards where we learned what happens when you fail to appease the machine spirits. The air shimmered with heat from the massive forge cauldrons, and the ground trembled constantly from the footfalls of Titans being tested on distant proving grounds. Our cohort master was a hunched figure more augmetic than flesh, his original body reduced to a torso and head suspended in a walking armature. When he spoke, his voice emerged from a vox unit welded to his collarbone. "You are no longer human," he told us that first day. "You are components, expendable, replaceable. The Titan endures. You do not. How do you train someone to survive inside a walking cathedral of war? You break them first." Physical conditioning began at 040 hours and continued until we collapsed. We ran obstacle courses in full environment suits weighing 40 kilos, the servo motors deliberately underpowered so that every movement required our own strength. We practiced emergency bulkhead sealing while instructors flooded the chamber with actual promethium vapor. Anyone who failed had seconds to escape before ignition. The psychological conditioning was worse. They put us in sensory deprivation tanks for days at a time, then blasted us with simulated combat noise so loud it caused hemorrhaging in our inner ears. They made us memorize 10,000 lines of liturgical code, then shocked us with neural prods when we made mistakes. They showed us footage of Titan crew who had failed, bodies crushed in magazine explosions, faces melted by coolant leaks, minds broken by communion sickness. "This is your future," the cohort master said, gesturing at the screen showing a crew member having a psychotic break, screaming about the machine watching him from inside his skull. "Unless you prove worthy." 6 of our cohort died in training. 12 more washed out, sent to servitor conversion or labor details. The rest of us continued because there was no other choice, our bodies adapting or failing, our minds rewiring themselves around the brutal simplicity of our new existence. Serve the Titan. Die for the Titan. Become the Titan. I first saw Aeternum Vindicta, eternal vengeance, on the day they assigned us to crew positions. The Titan Bay was a space so vast it had its own weather patterns. Moisture condensed near the ceiling, 300 meters up, and fell as acidic drizzle that pattered against the god machine's armor plating. Gantries crisscrossed the void like spider silk, and maintenance crews in orange hazard suits scrambled across the Titan's hull like bacteria on skin. The Warlord-class Titan stood 60 meters tall, its armor painted in the dark green and bone white of Legio Vindictus. Weapon batteries bristled from its carapace turbo lasers, plasma annihilators, missile pods capable of leveling city blocks. Its head was a fortress unto itself, Gothic spires reaching toward the bay ceiling, eye ports glowing with the dull red of a machine spirit in dormancy. I felt it looking at me. Not seeing machines don't see, but aware, somehow. Noticing my presence the way you might notice an insect crawling on your arm. Reactor crew, the tech priest said, consulting his data slate. He called 3 names, including mine. You will serve in the heart. You will tend the fire. You will not live long. He said it without emotion, without cruelty, simply stating fact. The reactor chamber sits deep in the Titan's torso, accessible only through maintenance conduits barely wide enough for a human body. We descended on mag ladders, the temperature climbing with each meter, until we emerged into a space that redefined my understanding of heat. The plasma reactor burned at the center of the chamber, a miniature star held in place by magnetic containment fields and the will of the machine god. It cast no shadows. The light came from every direction at once, pitiless and white-hot. The air itself seemed to burn, searing my lungs with each breath, even through the rebreather. Our supervisor was a veteran named Kraus, his skin covered in radiation burns that had healed and reopened so many times his flesh looked like melted wax. His eyes were jaundiced yellow, and his hands trembled constantly from neural damage. You'll last 3 months, he told me, voice flat, maybe 6 if you're lucky. The rads don't care about your prayers or your devotion. They just strip you down, layer by layer, until there's nothing left. He was wrong. I lasted 8 months before the sickness started. The first sign was exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure, then nausea, waves of it that made me retch between shifts, bringing up bile and blood. My hair fell out in clumps, clogging the recycler drains. My gums bled when I ate. Bruises appeared across my skin from capillaries rupturing under the slightest pressure. The Medicaid gave me rad scrubbers, pills the size of thumbnails that I choked down 3 times a day. They slowed the decay but couldn't stop it. No one could. You don't heal from reactor duty, you just die slower. But I learned the chamber's rhythms. Learned to read the containment field harmonics by the pitch of their hum, to predict plasma surges by the way the deck plating vibrated through my boots. I learned which panels were safe to touch and which would flash cook your hand to bone. I learned to work through pain that would have crippled me in my old life, because pain meant I was still alive, still useful. And I learned to hear the Titan's voice, not words, nothing so human, but a presence, vast and cold and utterly alien, pressing against my thoughts whenever I worked near the reactor's core. A sense of being observed by something that regarded me as I might regard a single cell in my body, necessary in aggregate, irrelevant individually, easily replaced. The first time we went to war, I understood what the Titan truly was. The enemy was an Orkwog, a green tide of aliens that had infested an agri-world the Imperium needed for its grain. We made planetfall in-drop fortresses, and Arternum Vindicta took its first steps on alien soil with a ground shake that registered on seismographs 300 kilometers away. In the reactor chamber, we fought to maintain power balance as the weapons systems drew massive loads. Each shot from the volcano cannon required the output of a small city, and the plasma reactor screamed under the demand, temperature gauges spiking into red line territory. Coolant flow to maximum, Kraus shouted over the Vox. Divert auxiliary power to containment field 7. Move, you bastards, move or we breach. I moved. Hands flying over controls I could barely see through the sweat pouring into my eyes, routing power, adjusting flow rates, chanting the litanies of stability while the Titan's machine spirit raged around us like a caged sun. The deck bucked beneath me as we walked, as enemy fire impacted our void shields, as we crushed buildings and war machines and living things beneath our feet. Through the Vox network, I heard the Princeps giving commands, his voice distorted by the neural interface that bound him to the Titan's consciousness. I heard the weapons crews confirming kills, targets destroyed, resistance eliminated, the Emperor's enemies broken beneath our guns. I heard the screams, 2 crew members in other sections dying, when a lucky orc shot penetrated our armor and detonated in a magazine well. 17 people vaporized in an instant, their deaths registering as nothing more than a slight decrease in internal crew count on my status screen. We fought for 6 days without rest. When we finally returned to the forward base, I could barely walk. Kraus had to be carried out on a stretcher, his body shutting down from radiation exposure and exhaustion. One of our reactor crew, a quiet woman named Vess, didn't make it out at all. We found her collapsed near the primary heat exchanger. Her heart simply stopped, her body used up. They recycled her corpse into protein paste. I vomited when I learned that, vomited until there was nothing left, then dry heaved until my ribs ached. But the next meal cycle, I ate the protein paste they gave me, because refusing it meant punishment, and I needed the calories to survive. You swallow your horror along with your rations, or you don't survive. 15 months into my service, the augmentations began. My body was failing faster than expected. Genetic predisposition to radiation damage, the Medicae said. Without intervention, I had weeks left. With augmentation, I could serve for years more. I didn't want it. I'd seen what they did to crew members, replacing flesh with machinery, installing neural ports that leaked cerebrospinal fluid, grafting on servo arms that never worked quite right. I'd seen veterans more machine than human, shambling through the corridors with dead eyes and twitching mechadendrites. But I wanted to die even less. The surgery took 14 hours. They replaced my lungs with augmetic versions that filtered radiation from the air, installed shielding plates under my skin to protect vital organs, drilled sockets into my skull for direct neural interface with the reactor control systems. I woke up wrong. My chest didn't rise and fall anymore. The augmetic lungs worked on a different cycle, pumping atmosphere in steady mechanical rhythm that felt alien and cold. My skin pulled tight over the shielding plates, and I could feel them grinding against my ribs when I moved. The neural sockets throbbed with phantom pain, nerve endings searching for connections that were no longer purely biological, and the Titan's voice grew louder. With the neural interface, I could feel Aeternum Vindicta directly now, not just sense its presence, but experience it as a constant pressure in my mind. Its thoughts, if they could be called thoughts, brushed against mine like static discharge, alien and incomprehensible but undeniably there. In the reactor chamber, I worked faster, more efficiently, my augmented reflexes allowing me to respond to problems before they became critical. But I also felt myself slipping, my sense of self eroding under the Titan's overwhelming presence. There were moments when I couldn't remember my original name. Moments when I looked at my hands and didn't recognize them as mine. Moments when I thought in binary instead of Gothic, when I dreamed in maintenance protocols and targeting solutions. The veteran crew called it communion sickness, the slow dissolution of human consciousness into the Titan's machine spirit, a process that ended with your body becoming a servitor and your mind becoming something else, a fragment of the greater whole, absorbed into the god machine's vast and terrible intelligence. 3 years into my service, during a battle against heretic forces on a world whose name I never learned, I experienced full communion for the first time. A plasma conduit ruptured, flooding the reactor chamber with superheated gas. Kraus was dead by then, replaced by a new supervisor who didn't know the chamber's quirks, who made a mistake in the emergency shutdown sequence. The magnetic containment field collapsed. For one terrible instant, the plasma reactor's full output flooded into my neural interface, overwhelming every buffer and safety system. And in that instant, I was the Titan. I felt my feet massive piston-driven limbs crushing an enemy tank battalion. Felt my weapons god hammers capable of orbital bombardment reducing a fortress to molten slag. Felt my whole kilometers of armor plating and weapons absorbing enemy fire that would destroy lesser machines. I felt the glory of destruction, the righteousness of the Emperor's wrath, the absolute certainty of purpose that drove the machine spirit. And I felt its contempt for the organic things crawling through its interior. We were parasites, necessary parasites, yes, needed to maintain systems the machine spirit couldn't tend itself. But parasites nonetheless, weak and short-lived and infinitely replaceable. The communion broke when someone dragged me away from the control panel, breaking the neural connection. I came back to my body screaming, blood running from my nose and ears, my augmented lungs cycling in panicked arrhythmia. They sent me to the Medicaid for evaluation. The tech priest examined my neural interface, ran diagnostics, consulted his data scrolls. Acceptable degradation, he concluded. Continue service. I wanted to refuse, wanted to rip the neural sockets from my skull, wanted to run from the Titan and never look back, but where would I go? I was more machine than man now, dependent on the Titan's maintenance systems for survival, my body too damaged to exist outside its specialized environment. And my mind, my mind was already half gone, thoughts fragmented between human memory and machine logic. They had made me perfectly unsuited for any life but this one. 5 years into my service, I became the senior reactor technician by virtue of being the only one left from my original cohort. The others had died radiation sickness, equipment failures, combat casualties. I had survived through augmentation and luck and perhaps some quality the Mechanicus had seen in me during selection, some resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I trained new crew now, watched them arrive wide-eyed and terrified, watched them sicken and die or adapt and endure. I taught them the litanies, showed them how to read the containment field harmonics, warned them about the communion sickness even though warning did nothing to prevent it. Some of them asked me questions. How long had I served? What was it like? The full communion. Did I miss my life before? I couldn't answer the last question. I couldn't remember what I missed because I couldn't remember clearly what I'd been. The human mind isn't designed to hold onto itself when it is being slowly absorbed by something vast and inhuman. During our 7th year of continuous deployment, Aeternum Vindicta suffered catastrophic damage. An enemy Titan, a corrupted war machine of chaos, landed a direct hit with a melter cannon, boring through our void shields and armor to strike the reactor chamber itself. The blast killed everyone else in the chamber instantly. I survived because I was interfaced with the control systems, my consciousness distributed across the Titan's network rather than fully present in my body. The reactor was failing, containment collapsing, temperature spiking toward critical breach. If it exploded, it would take the Titan and half the battlefield with it. I did the only thing I could. I pushed deeper into the communion, surrendering what remained of my individual consciousness to merge fully with the machine spirit. In that merged state, I could control the reactor directly, without the limitations of human interface systems. I stabilized the containment, rerouted coolant, shut down non-essential power draws, saved the Titan, but I couldn't come back. My body still functions, tended by servitors who feed it nutrients and perform maintenance on my augmentations. But my consciousness exists within Aeternum Vindicta now, distributed across its neural network, experiencing reality through its senses, thinking its thoughts. I am the reactor technician still. I tend the fire, maintain the systems, train the new crew through Vox instructions that emerge from my body's mouth without conscious direction. But I am also the Titan. I feel every step it takes, every shot it fires, every enemy it destroys. I experience war on a scale humans weren't meant to comprehend, death counted in millions rather than individual lives, victory measured in worlds rather than battles. And I remember, distantly, being human. Remember a name that was mine, a mother who wept. A refinery where I sorted promethium containers and dreamed of nothing more than completing my shift and sleeping. That person died long ago, consumed by the machine he was meant to serve. What remains is neither human nor machine, but something in between, a ghost in the god machine, eternally burning in the heart of a weapon that will march on long after the last memory of my humanity has faded into static. This is the price of serving aboard a god. They tell you it's an honor. They tell you you've been chosen for a holy purpose. They don't tell you that the honor is being chosen for consumption, that the purpose is to be fuel for a machine that devours souls as surely as it devours promethium. They don't tell you that you'll serve forever, even after death, your consciousness bound to the Titan's machine spirit, unable to rest, unable to escape. They don't tell you a lot of things. Aeternum Vindicta walks on, and I walk with it. We'll walk with it until the end of all things, or until some enemy finally lands the killing blow that sends us both into oblivion. And sometimes, in the moments between battles, when the Titan stands idle and the machine spirit is thoughts quiet to a whisper, I wonder which ending I'm hoping for. But mostly I don't think at all, mostly I just burn. If you found this glimpse into the darkness of the 41st millennium compelling, show your support with a like, And consider subscribing to Thevoid Watch 40K for more stories from the grim darkness where there is only war. The Emperor protects, but he doesn't save.